if I could just invite my panelists to come up. And in the meantime, I'll give a bit of a roadmap as to what you can all expect in the next 45 minutes. Very conscious that we are standing between you and the end of this conference. Essentially, we'll have a brief opening. Then I'd like to invite my esteemed panel to sort of introduce themselves and maybe speak, over 2 or 3 minutes, what they'd like to, what points they'd like to make. And then I have one question each for my panelists before I want to open the floor, open for questions to the floor, because on the floor I was itching to ask many, many questions, and so I'm sure it'll be the same for everyone here as well. I think the previous panel was a good place to start. We've talked about COP, and COP has been something that's on my mind because, as Sharab mentioned, I've worked on these climate change cases, and a big in theory, we had discussed a lot about how, 30 years of COP, if not more, and yet we haven't really managed to solve this crisis. A variety of reasons, of course. And earlier there was a discussion of, whether it's the developed world that's stacked the cards against us, or whether it's that we, the global south, have been a bit apathetic about our own role in what we can do at these forums. I think there's value in both sides. Now, when we talk about climate justice, I want to sort of scene set, right? Because the climate, there are these two big sort of high-level cases that are happening, or well, they've concluded. One was the first ever case. It was brought by the small island developing states. Now, they've been pushing, and I think one thing one has to remember when we talk about going to the grassroots, right? These incredible cases that now people like me, who actually, I'm not really a climate person, I wish I could say I was. There have been people who've been living and breathing this for 30 years, 40 years, right? It's purely because I am an expert in the procedure of these international courts that I got to do these cases. So I'm afraid I can't really say with pride that I lived and breathed this until recently. Now, when the states, the small island states, were talking about how they're facing an existential crisis. The rising sea levels means that many island countries are at risk of immediate sort of decimation, as it were. Young Pacific Islander students actually started pushing their governments to say, what are we doing about this? Every year our governments meet. Every year it's scheduled. They go to these conferences and they meet. And they have, it's 2 weeks, you seemingly putting your heads together, so much money is being spent, and yet the crisis gets worse every single year, right? So these students said, why don't we use international law? Now, of course, this year, given all of the things that's happening in the Middle East and everything else, I feel a certain degree of shame to call myself an international lawyer because we're seeing the failure of the system. But one has to understand that so much of what works as well, us flying places, sending post, all of that is because international law works. This is sort of what was the catalyst for bringing these cases to the international courts. And then we've sort of moved on in that these are advisory opinions that were asking the courts to tell us what is the sort of what are the legal obligations of states in relation to climate change? So it might sound like a very basic question because we all think it's obvious, but then again, the obvious is not so clear in the way that they say common sense is not so common. This is happening at the higher level, right? Then you have at the domestic levels in various jurisdictions, cases that are, moving the needle. And a very good example of it, just I think about 2 weeks ago, in a regional court in Germany, I think this was Hamm, there was a case brought by a Peruvian national in Germany regarding sort of the historical emissions of RWE, a sort of multinational company, because the claimant basically said that plaintiff, I'm sorry, said that these historical emissions had exacerbated the glacial melt in the Andes, and so his village was at imminent risk of being sort of washed away. And here in Bhutan, we know the context. Last year, Lunana, every year we talk about these gloughs and what that could mean for us. Sikkim, Himachal Pradesh, Pakistan, this case, sadly, in a sense, the court said they couldn't make a positive finding. Now, it's a technicality as I see it, about they couldn't find this imminent harm problem. But they did say, in principle, corporate emitters can in fact be held responsible for climate harms, as it were. So it's important now. This is 2 weeks ago, so sort of watch this space, right? And so I think there is, in the climate justice space, there's a lot, there's a role for all of us, as it were. So without sort of getting carried away, I'd like to invite my panelists to introduce yourselves and say what you will. I will start with Dr. Katel.
Thank you. Your Excellencies, Kempos, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. And huge gratitude to Tarayana Foundation for this opportunity. I'm severely nervous now because I have a teacher, my boss, and students in the audience. So, yeah, I work at the College of Natural Resources, and I'm not a lawyer. Sorry about that. I come from biological science. Probably my answer would be, your question would be from the perspective of biological sciences. What got me thinking this afternoon is that when Sneha was presenting this, how can we capitalize AI? Yesterday also, I listened to the AI, and in the age of AI, I was actually thinking about how can we actually make this AI better in terms of generating data and publications? Because I was looking at the contributions to global science and policy perspective. If I look at from this region is represented by 20% of the global population. And then in the Himalaya, it's, I think, 13% of the population, of the global population are on the mountains. And if we just look at global publications, actually in the IPCC, there are, I think, less than 3%. That's what I found. So when you talk about, ideas, yesterday, Andrew was talking about ideas can remain ideas, if we do not actually go beyond what we can do. How do we visualize what is the issues and where do we want to go? So that actually got me a lot of thinking, how can we actually contribute? And I come from university, and then from the university perspective, where do I stand? And there's a big question that actually I was asking myself. So I think I'll stop there for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm Sonam Wangchuk from Ladakh, and I've been, I did my engineering, but I like to call myself more of a problem solver and an educator. And while addressing education, I got interested in what it is for, and environment, and now the climate crisis is definitely the biggest problem to solve. And having come here, I saw beautiful contributions from different people from religious institutions to education to law, democracy. And these are the things I think need to be redefined now. Humanity has never faced a crisis like what it is facing now, particularly the HKH region, which is a topic of discussion now. We hold much of the fresh water of the world, the third pole, on which 2 billion people, 1/4 of the population of the world, directly or indirectly depend. And it holds so many forests that hold the carbon, without our new methods. And water, so much of water for this many people. So definitely this place deserves special care, concern, not just for itself, but for the entire humanity. And therefore, we need to redefine what education should be. I'll come to details later, but generally speaking, in post-climate change era, education has to address this issue, and post-climate change democracy needs to address this issue. Parliaments should perhaps bring nature into the house, and similarly law doesn't even recognize the slow poisoning that we go through. You only recognize stabbing and shooting. So all these economics, we have played around with money a lot. Maybe a new form of currency, apart from just credits, needs to trickle down to every individual. I might come to details later. But yes, even God itself needs to be redefined, because most violence today happens through climate and environment related things. So there's a huge upgrade needed on this planet.
Good evening. Just to begin with, I'm sort of using my company like this by being mindful as a Bhutanese man. I'm Pema Gyamtsho. I'm with the International Center for Integrated Mountain Development, ICMOD as it is called. And Dr. Sonam has just mentioned about the Hindu Kush Himalayas. So ICMOD is actually mandated to look at the issues facing the mountain communities, as well as the challenges, environmental challenges, climate challenges, economic challenges that the mountains, the Hindu Kush Himalayan region is facing. And as Sonam also briefly mentioned, that the HKH region, as it is called, is the third pole. It's often referred to as the third pole. And now we have a very active dialogue going with the Arctic Circle, the North Pole, and we are looking at how we can exchange experiences and learnings. Now, as water towers of Asia, we all know that 10 of the largest river systems of Asia actually have their origins in the Hindu Kush Himalayas, the Indus, the Ganges, the Brahmaputra, even the Mekong. So the importance of protecting this region, which is unique, in terms of its biological diversity, cultural diversity, and its ecosystem services. I think every one of us now in this room and beyond also appreciate that. And we have here the Excellencies, the Limbos, the Venerable Lepins, and all distinguished speakers from within Bhutan and from outside. And we need to look at how we can protect this unique region. So I will stop here at the moment, but I will come back later to some of the challenges that we are facing and how we are trying to address them. Thank you.
Once again, thank you. I'm Chencho Norbu, and my background is on soil and land management. And one of my problems sitting here is, if somebody talks, if I'm a moderator too much, I like to control him. Time is. But when I talk too much, if somebody says, your time is, I get a bit upset. I want to talk more. So that is my actually problem. But having said that, let me reflect on my observations. I actually participated in a number of COPs, be it climate change, biodiversity, desertification. So I have seen through and through. And what I have noticed is, wherever there is a money, people tend to concentrate on that and discuss more on that. And that is where the excitement builds on. But my own personal observation is, particularly like Hindu Kush, like country like Bhutan, Nepal, I think land is dearest to our heart, to our farmers. If you can take care of your land, you can really solve climate change, you can solve biodiversity problems, water issues. But we don't do that. We want to look at the glaciers. Everyone is talking on that. What exactly can a household do to stop that receding? we are not possible. It is a collective, it's a global responsibility. So this is where the irony is. And my own recommendation is we look into our agriculture system, farming system. Like Tarayana is working in the remote villages. I would say that probably building on a good database. And I heard that you are building a database, so and so. And when you build a database or survey, I think it's not a straightforward answer. I think if you consult, reach out, I think you can really collect the information what is required now and then. If you do it on your own, you will say that, oh, I missed this one. By then again, you have to come back. It's a really resource incentive. Anything you do a disturb farmer, firstly, it is a resource incentive. Secondly, farmers have their own time. They will not be available for your question and answers. And if you come again and again, it will be irritants for them. You may not, get a cooperation from them when you visit next time. So in this line, I would say that probably we need to really reflect on our projects, programs, how we are actually aligning. So if you do that, I mean, definitely we will be happy. We will be operationalizing GNH in Bhutan, I believe, across the globe. Thank you.
Thank you. I was afraid I'd have to. Sorry, I was afraid I'd have to stop you, but you were very good on time. I want to just sort of pick up on a point that was mentioned in the earlier panel by Chimi Dorji about how we're not asking for charity. And I think that's a very critical point to make in the context of the cases. I realized I sort of did a whistle-stop tour of the cases I'm doing, and I didn't really explain what sort of also brought it about, right? Because so much of the current system almost, we've heard about the 1.3 trillion shortfall, that the global south effectively requires from the global north. Developing is a term that's a little bit sort of loaded. I think what the global south has demanded at these forums is that they're not asking for any more charity from the developed world. I'm sorry, I used that word again. But rather, it's that historical emissions, the current state that we're in has been caused by industrial nations that have eked out as much, extracted as much as they could from the globe, right? And now we have the irony where they know how to play, they know the rules. And so, we're being sort of disincentivized in a sense, the reforestation point made earlier as well. And so the Global South is saying, no, we're just saying, let's level the playing field. If you are responsible, you pay up. And that includes, technology transfer and all of that. Nobody's asking for a free lunch. We're just asking that we do a fair accounting, right? And I think that's critical to remember. Because otherwise, we again have, a polarization of, I'm sorry to say this, but white saviors and all of that, right? We're not asking to be saved, right? So I just want to sort of make that point. Now, I'll start with my first question, and this is to Professor Katel. Now, yesterday, Tan Sri Andrew referred to the ancient mariner, and he said, water, water everywhere, drop to drink. And this goes to the point that Sonam also mentioned with us having so much water effectively. But now I confess, again, to then touch on what my Dasho also said, that for the past 3 years, I've been so focused on advocating solely for our melting glaciers at the COPs and in legal forums. But yesterday, Pema C on one of the panels said, we, Bhutan, are not just mountains and glaciers. We are tropical forests, tribal areas, and more, right? And of course, this holds true across the HKH region. So in that context, Professor Katel, what are your reflections about the challenges faced by Bhutan and the wider HKH region? And how can we all join you in making a meaningful impact on the understanding and management of natural resources?
Um, Very interesting question, but at the same time difficult as well. I'd like to pick up from Michael's comments earlier. He said, do your science, prepare yourself, show the evidence, then you can sell it. So I think in terms of, I again think of data. Of course, we have this National Center for Hydrology and Meteorology. They have generated huge sets of data for now. But I think when we talk about climate change, it's not only about one discipline. We need to bring different stakeholders on board. We need to look at from the different perspective. Excuse me. What young people, students ask questions to me is, when you look at the literature, they have actually looked at from since 1820. For the last 200 years, they have generated data on temperature, precipitation, but then they also started awareness discussing about climate change since 1970s. I think it was Brundtland Commission. So even from 1970s until now, it is 50 plus years. So until now, what are we doing is a big question. And then climate change, when you talk about that, if you just look at temperature, precipitation, I think in terms of greenhouse gas concentrations, day before yesterday, I was checking the greenhouse gas concentrations. It's, I think, 430 point something ppm. And they say that if we need to maintain the temperature below 1.5 degrees Celsius, then we need to maintain 350 to 400 ppm until 2100. So we are here at 2025, and when I look at ppm, that's a scary picture. And what that means to younger generation is sometimes, my professor used to say that there are good news and bad news. Good news is that I would be long gone because I would not live another 50, 80 years. I'm already 60, 70 years. And bad news is younger generations. And they say that if you say this, we get anxiety because we have not contributed anything. And then you are tasking us for the issues which we have not created. What are you talking about? And I think it's a personal story as well. It's not only climate change. It's not only about science. It's a personal story. It's about mental health. It's about losing livelihood. It's about losing schooling, education, things like that. So I think in terms of educating our children, we talked a lot about how can we pass the cultural genes in addition to the hereditary genes so that they listen to us, so that they carry our traditions and culture. I think that's what we talked yesterday in one of the sessions. So, and then Sir Sonam also talked similar things with value. So, but in terms of this changing climate, young people ask me, there are things that you could actually, the elderly generations, the earlier generations, they could have already thought about it. They are just shifting the burden to us. Is it fair? This is the question, and I have no answer.
Thank you, Professor Katel. Now, I have the challenge that this esteemed panel can all actually answer these questions, but now I have to be targeted in the interest of time. But perhaps I can ask Dasho Chencho if you might want to sort of chime in on this, if at all. The question about, the challenges that we face, locally as well, right, in Bhutan and the wider region, and sort of what could we do to try and, protect our natural resources, as it were. You mentioned soil, right, and so perhaps you might want to add to what Professor Katel said.
Thank you. Let's look at the water. Now, there are areas that the water sources are drying, and some of our colleagues believe that we are having too many trees, which I doubt that is the case. And we also believe that communities are not really managing their watershed. I mean, that's what they believe. But the concern we have in our own local context is the water that is coming from the glacial sources is quite limited. If I'm not mistaken, it's less than 15%. Most of the water that we see in our 5 perennial river system comes from our watershed. But bit coming down to the mid-hills of our farming community, there we don't have high mountains where there's a snow or glaciers, no. But then the challenge is we hear a lot of farmers saying water sources are dying. But we do also have our clean water still flowing, and our friends downstreams are enjoying. But in a sense, we are not able to fully operate or utilize with the investment. Of course, this comes with the cost. We don't have any reserve dams that we use for water or agriculture purposes, no. It's all for hydro. So it's really time. First, we look into building reservoirs for our farming community, for our own drinking purpose. Secondly, we must explore the underground water that is there along the southern belt. And we have so many fears, drying up, underground, blah, blah. But across our neighbor, they're enjoying it. They have no other sources. So for us, as long as the monsoon comes on time, regularly, we should not be having a problem of this crisis if we know where the sources is and how we use sustainably. Thank you.
Add and clarify something, the importance of glaciers. In quantity, maybe it is less than 15% or 11% in most rivers, I'm told, except Indus, where it is 49% or so. But the point is that glacial melt comes when farmers need the most. Rainwater, you can get 99%, and that will be the biggest disaster, because when you get, it will be floods. And when you don't, it will be drought. So glaciers play that very significant role. Of all the water that falls, I think we don't even use 2%. Of that, more than half would be glacial water in most cases, because in spring, when you really need the most for plants, that's when the glaciers help. And that's why in Ladakh, we are trying to develop man-made artificial glaciers, trying to refreeze the winter water, which otherwise goes waste, so that it is available in springtime. It's not issue about water per se, it's about water at the time when you need. When you don't need, we get floods. We don't need that water. Somebody take away and we'll be happier. That's the issue with water. And therefore, I often think and say that like carbon credit, there should be water credit. These are related, actually interlinked also. When you have forests conserved, you have water also conserved. Next to glacier is forests. As long as you have forests, and you're lucky to take good care of forests in Bhutan, you will have some regulation of water because of the forest. But what is happening in most of Hindu Kush Himalayas is, on one hand, glaciers are melting. On the other hand, you're cutting the forest. So there's nothing to soak in monsoon, therefore floods, and there's nothing to release it in the rest of the times, droughts. So water may be 100%, but it will be disastrously at the wrong times, is the concern.
Thank you for that intervention, and I just feel it's such a pity that we didn't have a voice like yours at the International Court of Justice, because I was painfully aware of the lack of adequate representation. The challenge that the mountains we've had at COP and at the UN and similar forums is that we've been lumped under the cryosphere for so long. There's an issue with that in that the Arctic Circle and these other sort of ice-laden places, right, are advocated for by the great powers because there is a lot of strategic interest. Rather insidiously, powers, Western powers, are maybe I'm being unfair, but they are in a sense happy that the ice is melting at the poles, because it means that a new sea route is opening up. Until now, it was Russia and a few other places. You read the naval journals and it'll tell you that. This is not just my sort of, I don't know, not going on a jaunt here, but they have had concerns about how Russia controls the Arctic. But now, because the ice is melting, many powers are happy about the fact that their military ships can also make the advance up there. So it's critical to remember that many people at the table may not share the same interests, and I saw that for the glaciers, which is why it is important for us to keep advocating for that. And I just really wish you'd been there. What a compelling testimony you would have given at the International Court of Justice. Now, I want to pivot to Dr. Pema. I confess now, I think you'll see a running trend. I confess to a little fatigue that has set in after seeing the two COPs, because I went to COP 28 and 29 as part of the Bhutan delegation, and also these two climate change advisory opinions. A cynicism, in a sense, has set in by confronting the invisible walls and these glass ceilings that have been put in place by the global north. And I noticed that there is strangely a disconnect between the science, the law, and policy, which is why maybe 30 years or whatever on, we are not fixing this crisis. Now, ICIMOD is a regional intergovernmental organization that's been focused on learning and knowledge sharing since 1981, and it has 8 significant member countries of the HKH that we referred to earlier. I should be clear, there are the membership comprises of Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Bhutan, China, India, Myanmar, Nepal, and Pakistan. So my question to Dr. Pema, who is the Director General of ICIMOD, and we're very proud that he's the first Bhutanese to have taken this role. How can ICIMOD evolve an integrated regional governance platform that supports ecological policy and community-led initiatives? So in essence, to try and break this sort of silo that seems to exist.
Okay. Before that, let me just touch briefly on Chencho and Sonam's discussion on water. I think we have to recognize that climate change is really, quite a lot about water. Either too much water or too little water. Too much water, we have disasters like floods. Too little water, we have drought, heat waves, and so on. So if we can address the issue of water, too much water or too little water, many of the challenges that we are facing could be actually addressed. Now, let me come back to your question, Tshering. Well, ICIMOD is working in this very complex geopolitical setting. But having said that, we know that climate change is a transboundary issue. It doesn't recognize borders. The other climate crisis, the planetary crisis, air pollution. Pollution is a transboundary issue. Biodiversity loss is a transboundary issue. So unless the countries in this region come together, we are not going to be able to address any of these crises. So therefore, ICIMOD, as the regional organization, I think the first thing we do is that we remain apolitical, non-political, neutral. So as a neutral convener, we are able to bring the scientists, the policymakers, the decision makers, the practitioners, the farmers, students to come together and discuss this common challenges and issues. This is about connecting people, communicating to each other, talking about coordination, talking about collaboration. So we regularly organize things called science policy dialogue. And now we have also extended that to include the investors. So science, policy, finance dialogue. Now we go a step beyond and include the practitioners. So we operate in the interface between science, policy, and practice. Now integrating scientific evidence with indigenous knowledge. Then we work at different levels, from governments to grassroots level organizations. So we are also here actively working with Tarayana Foundation. Do you have one more?
I'm afraid I might have to cut you off there. Thank you. I'm really conscious of time, but I want to ask my next question to Sonam. And this picks up on what Daniel Fung mentioned earlier about deep listening, and also what Yellow Wouters said about the deep listening to the mountains and glaciers. Now, you have truly lived and breathed this deep listening. You know, while the glaciers around the world are dying at alarming paces, you built the ice stupas, a man-made wonder that mimics the nature-made wonders that glaciers are. How can we, in your view, promote an effective strategy for placing traditional and ancestral wisdom that you mentioned in your session this morning at the center of decision-making, away from this current paradigm of sort of profits maximization and profits first? And how do we emphasize the limits of money and then the power of, you know, degrowth and the sacred pause and economic rest and the rest of that?
Thank you. First of all, yes, about glaciers and forests that really are what makes life livable in most of these mountains. Development, economic or otherwise, does not need to be you destroy something and then you repair and there's transaction of money in that and that's your growth and GDP, whatnot. We need to learn to do less and not too much. That's what GNH against GDP is. GDP can grow when there's crime, when there's destruction, and the repair, it all reflects positively. I'm sure the Sikkim flash flood and the destruction and the exchange gone in repairing the damage must have raised the GDP of Sikkim. But wisdom is different. These are all what I call cleverness. Cleverness is this monkey mind that is jumping about what it can do. Wisdom is in realizing the futility of doing what is not wise to do and doing less, and therefore conserving what is there. To keep the glaciers, to keep the forests is what wisdom should lead. And that's what I say, redefine education. You know, redefine education into doing not too much, but keeping what already exists and traditions that take stewardship of these. Coming to money, as Dashola also mentioned, the world tends to bend towards where there is money. Yeah? I've been thinking, and I would like to pose this question I've been thinking among many, you know, banking and economic experts here. After trying all kinds of awareness building and so on, there's so much awareness today, but there's hardly any action. We're just helplessly slipping down the same thing. We know what is at the bottom. So maybe human nature is not about awareness and understanding. Maybe we should play into what human nature plays with, and that is maybe greed and growth and all that. So I've been wondering, why don't we change the programming of that human nature by coining a new currency? Why don't we redefine economics? If you think of the current currencies, dollars, rupees, they were based on gold in the past, not anymore, but on gold. Gold being the most precious material that everybody valued could become the base of the currency which everybody respected. Today, the most precious element is not gold, it's actually oxygen, which is getting shorter and shorter, and carbon dioxide, which is becoming a problem. And therefore, can't we play around and create a currency that is based on oxygen, that is based on carbon capture, and that then is valued and recognized by all countries, and therefore trading happens in that? If that happens, then countries that preserve and conserve their forests will be rewarded. It's like Bhutan finding a big gold mine in its forests. It's like Ladakh, if it plants all the more trees, it's creating gold, which then is respected in a currency, and thereby it plays into basic human nature, and growth will happen, but on carbon capture and oxygen release. Only that kind of going deep into human nature might save our behavior, human behavior. And then we are not worried. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Then we won't be worried if the global powers bend towards money of this kind. So something needs to be done, please. Yeah, I propose it to all of you to think of a basic shift in what we see.
That's a remarkable suggestion, and remarkable doesn't cut it, but I think that might be food for thought for an entire conference. And you've given us a lot to think about. Thank you. Conscious of time and my promise that I would open up, to questions, I want to ask my last question to Dasho Chencho, and then I will have to beg the indulgence of the organizers for some closing remarks. Dasho, now, this was alluded to by Dr. Pema regarding our geopolitics, but our region, SAARC, and the HKH region has been a bit notorious for fragmentation. Sadly, in my view, a relic of the colonizers in India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and the British policy of divide and rule, which insidiously continues to wreak havoc even today. Insidious also because countries like Bhutan and Nepal were never colonized, and yet, we suffer on. But I want to take up the Tarayana ED, Sonam Pem's siren call yesterday for us to move away from fragmentation to interconnectedness. And so, Dasho, I want to ask for your views on how we, and this is sort of action-oriented, right? This was asked earlier, but how can we in the Himalayas build a united alliance, to speak with one voice in global platforms like COP, UN, the G20, and to advocate a shift from reactive participation to proactive leadership?
Thank you. Before I come to that question, I have to share another experience. But having said that, I think the first thing we need to look at in our own local context. Now, for example, in our own local context, we have a climate change focal person, we have a biodiversity focal person, we have a desertification focal, we have a GCF, that's a financing climate, we have JEF. How often do we meet in our own local to share for what you're going, what are your issues? Did it ever happen? I doubt. Now, if you cannot connect locally, how can you think of bringing countries together? So the basic, I would say that, to the young generations who are in the civil service, I think it's high time that you have an annual coordination in a platform where all these GCF, JEF, World Bank, they come together. Now, if you ask any banks like ADB or World Bank or GCF, JEF, your procedures are too lengthy, it's so demanding. No, we didn't do it. Your countries have done it. But on the field, do you know that who are attending this? No. So first step I would really urge is that you need to come together and really share. And even after the COP, come for debriefing. What has been taken place is not happening. Now then, like in the previous session, we are saying, the lawyer said, we are dominated by developed countries. They would do. For instance, EU. I think for the EU delegation, I think every 6 months they rotate their presidency. But that stand doesn't change. Because they're well informed away what is the next agenda going to be discussed. They will be discussing among themselves. So we must have a habit of building our own team and preparing ourselves, be it climate change, biodiversity, or desertification, or for that matter, JEF Council or GCF board meeting. And I'm not so sure whether our representations from the finance ministry ever come and to the agriculture or other sectors. I'm going for a board meeting. what can exactly we can bring to that table. I'm actually a bit concerned on this line. This is something that we need to change. Now, if you are at the local, very firm in your team, and you speak one as a voice, I think you can encourage the other members to join. But this disease is not limited to Bhutan. I have seen same through our Asian countries where I visited, and I have known for that. So I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm conscious that we've run out of time, but I will ask the audience your indulgence for maybe 5 more minutes, because I promised to open the floor to questions, and so 4 minutes of that will be for questions. So, and this is also promised. Daniel, I see that you are already...
And as somebody who's also submitted an amicus curiae brief to the International Court of Arbitration on the South China Sea, I'd like to say one thing, that the deployment of law as a tool to effect climate justice should not be overlooked. And therefore, I commend you, Prem, leading this panel, and I commend everybody here. And I'd like to just end by noting how much advance we've made. In 1975, as a young pupil, just freshly called to the English bar, I participated in a very small way in a case called the Ocean Island case, which some might know, many do not anymore. Because what happened was, in the year 1900, phosphate was discovered on this island called Banaba, which is today part of Kiribati. That was a tragedy for that island, because the British Empire granted a lease to a phosphate mining company. They cut down all the trees and they mined the phosphate. The islanders originally leased the land. After a while, they thought that this is no good because there's no replanting at all, no reforestation. They refused. What the government did was to forcibly force the islanders to sell the land, and there was devastation. In 1975, they brought a case in the English High Court, led by a famous silk called Sam Stamler. I was part of that team, to claim justice, climate justice. In 1977, the English High Court rejected that case, saying that there's no fiduciary duty owed to the islanders. And in any event, the whole case was time-barred. It's too long. Now, today I'm heartened to learn from Pem that of the German case, where the Peruvian sued the German government successfully, German domestic court. And I think this tool of the law must be deployed, because I think the time is long past when we attend all these conferences, including at COP, which I confess I will also be attending. But we are realistic to know the limitations to a dialogue. There must be some action, and the law is a tool. And I don't want to say any more because it's the topic for yet another series of conferences, but this is a very, very powerful tool that small nations, let's say Bhutan, can deploy to their benefit, because with the devastation that we're suffering, and the whole globe is suffering from that, with the effects, deleterious effects on the Trans-Himalayan region of the glaciers, there has to be some redress. And the law is, I repeat, a powerful tool.
Thank you. With the permission of our moderator, I just want to share one very inspiring story from China. Something that Jack Ma is doing. And I hope our Ma Jun and other bankers and investors here would probably take that idea up. And we have the decision makers. We have also our spiritual leaders here. I think this is something that combines, brings together all that we have been discussing over the last 2 days. Digital technology, how it can be used to provide climate justice and also address some of the issues that we have been discussing. Now, some of you may be having the pedometer watch. Okay? He has introduced a scheme where people are encouraged to walk, and once they've accumulated a certain number of steps, it is monetized. But the money doesn't come to you as payouts. It is credited to the plantation of a tree in your name. Now imagine that. If we can do that in China, and if we can do that in India, if we can do that in Bhutan, if we can do that in Nepal, there would be a greening of minds, greening of hearts, and greening of money. So I think this is something that is very practical. It can be done, and it can be done at every level. So this is the message I would like to leave. It is already systemized, like digitized, and money comes from Jack Ma. Jack Ma, the billionaire. And so we have also one June Ma here. So we need to challenge him to start this scheme. And I think this is a very practical thing and which can be done. We live in a very dangerous world, after listening to everybody, digital content creation, digital infrastructure. So it looks like we have to also be very much aware that we are living at a time when most information are fake, when intelligence have become artificial, and we run the risk of being very superficial, and that is something that we all need to be aware of. Thank you.
Thank you. Just so that my thing to open the floor is not performative, I will invite one more question or comment if there is any pressing one. Anyone on the floor? Going once? Going twice? All right. I see none, so I will close. We've had quite a lot of discussion. There's a lot more work to be done. This entire conference has given us so much food for thought, and I think it's serendipitous that this is happening now. We in Bhutan especially, I feel, we owe it to the world and to GNH's architect, the Great Fourth, His Majesty King Jimmy Wangchuk, to operationalize GNH in the context of the wider world so that it is understood in terms of the global lingo and its benefits can be truly enjoyed by citizens of the world and all sentient beings, elephants and golden langurs included. As Her Majesty the Gyayum aptly said yesterday, we are at a critical point where GNH offers the world an alternate path. There was talk of intergenerational justice and how we can make the world a better place. His Majesty the King Jimmy Sonam Wangchuk's vision for GMC is exactly that, a bold new chapter for operationalizing GNH. I want to pick on what Tim Hwang had said yesterday about the sacred pause. And I think this is the moment for that sacred pause. And in this pause, we must, with the great humility that Daniel Fung mentioned earlier, we have to understand why we failed in the past. To quote Dr. Balasubramaniam, accepting our own vulnerabilities in order to solve our problems. And in closing, I just want to quote Tan Sri Andrew again. We are embarking on a journey into the unknown, but we can only walk this path if we walk it together. Thank you. It's been an honor to be on this panel. Thank you very much for your patience.